Okay, good. So I'm Kurt Steuck. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. I have a PhD in educational psychology. Excuse me. I've been in academia. I was a federal researcher for almost 15 years in a training lab, education and training research lab. And then in 2000, they closed our lab. So I went out to the private sector. And in 2012 is when I really started focusing on this work that I'll talk about today. I was the senior researcher. That's what I gave myself the name of. And then I changed it to director of evaluation and research simply because my role changed in what happened. So while I live in San Antonio, Texas, I'm a native of Southern Wisconsin and still call that home. Here's what I want to talk about today. So the first part is just give you a context of my work. And it really boils down to education projects. Focus mostly on STEM education projects, but I do have some that wouldn't be formally classified as STEM. We work K-12, we work higher ed, we work workforce development. So there's a broad spectrum. The second point is about growing, expanding, changing. In 2012, when I started this project or when I started this company, those words were not in my vocabulary. I really wanted to work solo, do some work about 30 hours a week, and just kind of slide into retirement. Just 30 hours a week was going to be fine. And I'd never created a business plan. So even though there's a formal business plans out there, I never had one because I just thought this was going to be a nice ease into retirement. The second or the third point that I want to bring up then is the day-to-day work. And I refer to some of the work as pandemic-induced hibernation. I've had a couple of projects that just essentially went to sleep during it. And now we're resurrecting them. We're waking up and getting them going. So if you say PIH aloud, PIH, it just has that connotation of what happened. And then communication is the other day-to-day lesson learned that I have. Okay. Funding agencies. So we are the external evaluator for 22 different grants right now, 24 if you count two that just ended. We don't write grants as the principal investigator, but we're always a contractor or consultant to the universities or the school districts. And we are funded by a lot of the heavy hitters in terms of the STEM work, National Science Foundation, National Institutes, and so on. With NASA, we have 2 middle school grants where we're working with kids in that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then have funding from 2 of the state agencies. So that's kind of who funds our work. And these are the participants that we work with in our evaluations. So on the left-hand side, it's higher ed. We do a lot with interviewing undergraduates. And we do have one project that involves, a couple projects that involve graduate students. So we have PhDs in computer science in one of our projects that we interview with. On the right-hand side are the independent school districts and nonprofits. So we have interviewed or surveyed district staff, the grant facilitators, coaches, teachers, counselors. Then in the after-school programs, we have site coordinators and youth leaders. We've talked with elementary, middle school, high school students and their parents. So in December, it's happened a couple of times, had lunchtime presentation with PhD students. And that afternoon, I was on an elementary school playground with kindergartners. And so full range in just a matter of a few hours. And I had talked to a couple grad students the next day. And when I told them that I had been with PhDs and kindergartners in a matter of hours, they looked at me and said, well, did you see a difference? We are in a wide range of education groups. So the second topic that I want to cover was the transition from a sole proprietorship to my current status. And on the left-hand side in the yellow is really what I learned a lot about. And one of it is there's a business structure. When I started, I was a sole proprietor, and then I formed an LLC, but there's LLPs, single member LLCs, multi-member LLCs, so there's a variety of them. And then the tax structure is actually something separate. So the business structure is something you file with your local state government. The tax structure is something you file with the federal government, and specifically the IRS. I love the term, if you file your taxes on your 1040, the official designation for you is a disregarded entity. I wish that that was true, that they really didn't care, but they do care about your 1040s. What I did was formed an S corporation. So if you look over to the right side where it says change process, the different colors represent different things that I did. I hired a lawyer to set up the LLC, and she created the articles of incorporation and filed all the paperwork with the state. I would have done it wrong had I not gone through her. I hired a CPA to set up the S corporation. And again, I looked at all the IRS forms and documentation and thought, yeah, I can do this. And then it was like, no. And what happened is there were multiple forms. I would have filed some of them, not all of them. And then when I went to QuickBooks Online, I hired a QuickBooks Pro advisor to help me set up the company. Again, I would have not done it correctly or completely had I not hired those experts. The other stuff will come out in the matter of the talk. If you are interested in learning more, we can follow up later on this diagram, and I can send it to you. I actually presented this in AEA last November. Okay, so what did I do right? The first thing is I went to a number of courses on small business development at our local university. So University of Texas San Antonio has these little 1-2 hour workshops on taxing and CPA work and accounting and business structures and insurance, liability insurance, and so on, HR things. So I attended a number of them and walked out going, I can do this, but I really need to hire a lawyer or a CPA to do this. So I hired a lawyer. She created the LLC. I hired the CPA to do all of the S corporation things. And in both cases, they nailed it. They got it right the first time. So I didn't have to worry about all of that kind of work. QuickBooks. In the old days when business was slow, managed everything in an Excel spreadsheet. Once I started going to hiring employees and all, I knew I had to go up to QuickBooks Online. And there's a thing called a QuickBooks Pro Advisor. And they are ones who help set up, they're a liaison with QuickBooks. And so when we have an issue, my guy was able to call QuickBooks immediately and was able to call QuickBooks and was able to resolve the problems quickly. So I did other things like change company names. I opened up new bank accounts. My CPA said, make it a complete switch, a complete transition, separate one company from the other. One of the other things that I did was listen to the AEA ICTIG meetings at the national conference. When we were in rainy Cleveland in 2018, I heard several stories of people that had started up their business, and I walked out with just getting hit right between the eyes with the word redundancy. I had zero redundancy in my corporation. I ride my bicycle a lot. If I got hit, there would be no one to pick it up. If I got sick or a family member got ill, and it was just an eye-opener. I needed redundancy to handle if I was no longer there. So AEA ICTIG really did help me build. Here's what I hadn't planned for. All the additional expenses, QuickBook Online payments, payroll, taxes, Zoom accounts, Dropbox, Smartsheet, all the things that go into running a business. Just hadn't planned on all of those. State of Texas does not have a state income tax, so we just have to worry about the federal, but one of my employees lives in Ohio. So now I'm dealing with Ohio state income taxes, and their city has income tax to fund the school district. So I'm now working in QuickBooks, working with the state of Ohio and the city of Cincinnati. I'm doing more management tasks than I expected. So like with Smartsheet, we have all of our projects listed, all of the deliverables and tasks, and invoices were a big one. I was terrible about tracking invoices, which ones I'd submitted and which ones I'd been paid. And so that's now a management task that we have built into Smartsheet to track all of the invoices with 22 contracts. Some of mine are just an annual invoice, but some of them are quarterly. So it's a little bit harder to do. Another thing I wasn't expecting when I have employees, I have 3 full-time employees and a couple of contractors. I had one the other day ask for essentially an informal performance review. Wasn't expecting that. She was just, simply, can you tell me how I'm doing? I hired her in March. And the other thing was that I had told her that this position was temporary because I didn't know what my funding would be like in 2021. So I said, you're golden through December of 2020, never thinking that that's only a couple months away. And she kind of needed to know if I was going to hire her, keep her on in 2021. So I had to reassure her that she was good through next year also. But it was that little thing that I hadn't planned for about working with true employees or those performance reviews. Kind of a funny one is my reports in the past were as ugly as possible. So everyone who is on how do you market yourself and advertise and data visualization, they could have used my reports as the poster child of what not to do. I actually sent my reports out with coffee recommendations. How many cups of Starbucks coffee do you need? And there was one that I actually gave it a 2-box rating. You needed 2 boxes of Starbucks coffee to get through that one. And now we're doing the visually pleasing reports. But the thing I had not planned for is my roles changed. So I said I went from senior researcher to this director position. It's because I love doing databases and putting data into Excel files and creating pivot tables and creating mail merges and get the data out in really cool formats and everything. And I don't do that as much now. I work more with my team on a day-to-day basis. More of an advisor, kind of a coordinator of things. I have to make sure that they're all actively busy on enough projects to keep them engaged, but not so many that I've overloaded them and that we break deadlines and things. So being more of a reviewer advisor is really something I hadn't thought about. It's a fun role, but I hadn't thought about it. Okay, day to day. Redundancy. We have, because of internet issues, I have at least 2 team members on my call whenever we're working with a client. If we're doing interviews, there's at least 2 of us. So in March, when we were interviewing 60 undergraduates in a couple of projects, there were 2 of us online. One would facilitate the discussion, one would be recording notes. But in several cases, my internet just crashed. Stephanie picked it up. My coworker picked it up and went with the interview and the note-taking without me, and I was able to join in about 5 minutes later. We do all the good business stuff with shared repository via Dropbox. We have a paid Zoom account, and Friday afternoons we have our team meeting, and it's informal. We joke, we laugh. But we do a lot of the technical development at that time that's a little more engaging and rewarding. But typically I plan for 1 hour or 2 hours, and the last one went 4, and we've had one go 5. We use Zoom all the time because we are spread out. We gave up our office and work at home. But one of the things that we learned was to put travel time in between meetings. So I was talking with a dean at a local university. He said, in the old days, when we had meetings, we had to walk from one building to another, and there was 5 minutes there or 10 minutes of downtime where you could think about what the meeting would just happen to what you needed to do, or you could relax and you could think about the next meeting, but we had a break between meetings. And so we explicitly build in travel time. Another funny thing that's happened is one of my coworkers has created a break time sheet that she actually holds up in front of her monitor when it's time to take a break. She drinks a lot of water, so it's like, I need a break. What made it even funnier is that it came laminated one day. She took the time to laminate it. The one point that's worked extremely well for us is the day-to-day, as we are in constant contact with each other via Skype. So we have open a window on our separate monitors for Skype so that we're always in contact, because when we were in the office, we could just, start talking. We shared an office. And now, without having that, the Skype really has been, hey, can you talk about this for a minute? Can you jump on Zoom? We keep in constant contact.